Leon Trotsky wrote an entire book dedicated to the problems of the Soviet Union. In that book, he argued that Stalin was the primary cause of all these issues. Except Trotsky himself created all of the problems he complains about. He killed, silenced, and imprisoned countless political enemies throughout his life. He had Lenin's blessing and the political power to deal with Stalin. Instead, he did nothing. He wrote essays, he blamed everyone and everything but himself. And everything I'm about to show you comes straight out of his own work. He wrote it when he was in exile. The revolution betrayed. So let's proceed to his accusations and review them one by one. The first accusation he makes is that Stalin killed inter-party democracy. In the book, Trotsky wonders where all the repression even comes from. He's genuinely confused why the people who helped to bring the revolution are suffering. But then he answers the question without even realizing it. A few pages later, he admits that he and Lenin banned every other political faction back in 1921. In his defense, he says it was a temporary solution to a very complex issue, and it's Stalin's fault for making the temporary solution and turning it into a permanent policy, something that they never planned to do. He says, this forbidding of factions was again regarded as an exceptional measure to be abandoned at the first serious improvement in the situation. And then, one paragraph later, what was in its original design merely a necessary concession to a difficult situation proved perfectly suited to the taste of the bureaucracy. So he basically admits that he created a weapon and is mad about the fact that someone uses it against him. But there's one obvious question that never surfaces. Why would you create this tool in the first place if you fear that your enemies are going to employ it against you? You're either pretending that there is no problem in there, or you genuinely don't see it. And I can't tell you which one is more concerning. His second accusation is that Stalin betrayed the revolution. Workers turned into slaves and the bureaucracy turned into new aristocracy. Trotsky is furious that the new ruling class emerged out of the ashes of the old one. The bureaucracy that is selected by Stalin is living in nice apartments, they have nice vacations, the simple worker is nothing but an accessory, an assistant to a high-ranking bureaucracy. So the people who actually made the revolution possible get nothing in the end. This is the same person who advocated for militarized labor, and I don't mean it as just a slogan. I mean it as an actual policy. He proposed that when the civil war eventually dies down, instead of sending the Red Army back home to their families, let's turn an entire army into labor army. So instead of doing the typical things that soldiers do, so the same chain of command, same discipline, pointed at economic tasks as opposed to military tasks. He argued and he advocated that this is the right model for labor in general. He argued that this wasn't a slavery for the simple reason being that you are not working for an exploiter. There is no Tsar, there is no emperor you're working for. The people should feel like they are working for their future. They shouldn't feel like they're being forced into labor. So what is militarized labor if not slavery? I mean, you don't have a choice whether or not you want to work. If you refuse to do that, you would be labeled as a deserter. And as a deserter, you would probably be killed, or you would have been tortured, or something along the same lines. So while he is taking this moral high ground and accusing Stalin of turning workers into slaves, he was advocating for doing pretty much the same thing. Let's stop right here and look at the reality of things. He would have been objectively worse if he won. There is a difference between him and Stalin that we need to talk about. I made an entire video about Stalin, and I'm genuinely standing on what I said. Stalin was never a Marxist. He was a guy who wanted power, and he knew that there was this group of people who could give him this access to power. To become the part of this group, he needed to adapt this ideology. He needed to make it look like he cares about Marxism and what Marx had to say about the government. The reality is, when the situation forced him into certain decisions, he wasn't shying away from making those decisions. Stalin was criticized for abandoning the idea of permanent revolution. He didn't believe in that. He didn't believe that they need to pursue this idea of exporting the revolution into other countries. He was completely fine with keeping the revolution within the borders of the Soviet Union. Trotsky was different. Trotsky was the believer. Fans of Trotsky believed that if he had won, the Soviet Union would become this pure democracy where workers run the show. No gulags, no purges, just real die-hard socialism. Okay, let's do this thought experiment. Let's say Trotsky wins. What does he do first? What does he spend his entire life talking about? Permanent revolution. He doesn't want to stop at one country. He believes in the idea of permanent revolution, so that inevitably brings us to war. It's not a defensive war, it's an ideological war to spread the revolution further into Europe and Asia. Because the theory says that the revolution dies if it stays in one place, and no one can tell him no. Do you think Trotsky would have handled Holodomor any differently than Stalin? Do you think Trotsky would give a damn about victims of collectivization, about the kulaks? Do you think he would care about any of this? You know that this guy is responsible for the massacre in Kronstadt, so what makes you believe that he would have done anything differently? It's not like Stalin invented something completely new that didn't exist before and used it against Trotsky. Stalin inherited tools and practices from the previous administration, from the previous group of people who were the primary decision makers. While Lenin was alive, it was mainly him. As his health was deteriorating, he lost the control. Lenin was the primary decision maker. He was the leader of the entire movement. That is true. But Trotsky was the second in power. Trotsky had almost the same amount of respect and influence at the time. As Lenin's health was declining, you would think it's a natural thing that the second in power will slowly but surely take over. But he did nothing. So I do partially understand people who are glazing Stalin. I mean, he's a gigachad. The guy barely spoke Russian, but somehow he became the head of the Soviet Union. Yes, he was not a Marxist, not even close, but I genuinely don't understand what people find in Trotsky. I mean, the guy's just pathetic. He had all the cards in his hands, and he did nothing with them. That's why I can't understand how this guy has so many followers even today. It's not a rare occurrence seeing people actually arguing that Trotsky would have turned Soviet Union into some communist dreamland. But in practice, what we see is that he was about the same as Stalin, if not worse. I will repeat the same point. What makes him worse is that he was ideologically driven. He wasn't just thirsty for power like Stalin. He killed the protesters, he silenced the opposition. Not to mention the fact that they were not simple people. Lenin wasn't a peasant before the revolution. Trotsky wasn't a peasant before the revolution. If anything, Stalin fit the criteria of proletariat way more than Trotsky and Lenin ever did. So yes, with all the criticism towards Stalin, I will still hold the opinion that Trotsky was way worse.